And so often we take it as if you say anything about black folks and white people can hear it, you shouldn't have said it because it's anti-black and you making us look bad. I mean, that's going back to Bill Cosby saying, don't buy $300 pair of sneakers. And everybody's like, he shouldn't have said that because white people could hear that. So like, although Nike is making the $300 pair of sneakers, so they know good and well that we're buying $300 pair of sneakers. Yeah. It's not a secret.
Okay.
What's the name of it again?
It's called Chai and Gray.
Okay.
A date night with the doctors.
Good evening, and welcome to another podcast episode of Chai
and Gray.
Date Night with the Doctors. We've really appreciated the support and interest in Chai and Gray. Just to let you know, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're interested in receiving more content or looking at some of our earlier episodes. There will also post notifications for upcoming episodes, so check us out. So today we've got a pretty interesting topic, I think, on Van Jones' recent comments on COVID-19, which appeared in an op-ed piece in CNN this past week. Van Jones provides a pretty balanced presentation of the need for structural reform, as well his own challenges that mirror the challenges of African Americans regarding obesity, hypertension, and a number of other issues that are prevalent in Black communities, and in large part implore Black people to do better. So the question that we want to raise today is, how much better should Black people be doing? Did Van Jones get it right?
I think that Van Jones, for the most part, got it right. And it's funny that you and I have kind of shifted our opinions on this.
Right.
Before, I was fully behind Van Jones and agreed with him about 100%, which is very few people I agree 100% on. And then he disappointed me because I think that we do need to do better. We need to do better in our diets and things like that. But when he compared it to himself, he compared it to himself as a journalist. And especially traveling journalists are known to have the worst diets.
And that's also not particular to Black journalists. I mean, that's pretty much...
That's journalists. No, that's not Black journalists. Black people are usually going through those things. They're in the middle of Hurricane Katrina and Ferguson and things like that, but they're not reporting on it. And so when he compares his diet to the everyday Black person, I disagree with.
Well, I did think there was this broad leap from, here's the challenges that I've been having and Black people have been having as well, without contextualizing that, as you said.
I think that the article we're referencing is Van Jones, I'm someone COVID-19 could easily kill. Here's what I'm doing about it. And that was on CNN, it's on CNN.com. Also the difference is, what he's saying is, here is what I'm doing about it is, and this is a major difference. He does not live in the communities where these grocery stores are that sell a lower grade of food. I used to work in a grocery store, in the hood, and I saw food coming in, and it was not like we were not getting it out of boxes and things like that. This food was just coming in crates. Because it was coming from a different store. When it was past due at one store, they were sending it into the hood. Van Jones and I are about the same age. And I would be lying, and I've always said this, I would be lying, even though I grew up in the hood, lived in the hood just about my entire life. I would be lying if I said that I have the same exact experiences of many of the people who I saw.
Well, I think it's hard for those of us who have passed through multiple worlds, so to speak.
Yes.
And we continue to rep for communities in multiple ways, knowing that we have privileges and access to resources, move in circles, and have a different language around food than where we came from. We talk about organic and grass-fed over grain-fed.
You talk about that.
I talk with you about
it. And it goes over my head. One thing I will say is that I couldn't convince my father, with everything else I just said, I couldn't convince my father, and before my mother passed, I couldn't convince her to shop at better grocery stores. I took my father to the grocery store shopping one day, and we had a basket of food, and he couldn't find the normal junk food that he wanted.
Right.
He couldn't find the high C punch that was completely artificial flavor.
Yeah.
And he couldn't find other things. And you know that we left that basket of healthy food right there in the grocery store, drove a half hour out to another store, and it was like this man like crossed the threshold. He's like, this is the junk I've been looking for. So some people, and I was like, Daddy, come on.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm trying to sit here as your enlightened son, who learned a thing or two about diets, and he was like, yeah, but that's just not what I wanted. And sometimes that's the reality.
Well, let's think about comfort food and how it functions, especially for people who emerge from histories of scarcity.
Yes.
So it was always a big thing in my house. When you have guests over, you always make sure there's enough. You always feed them. So there was always plenty of food. And you usually find in places where there's less, there's always something that we invest more in.
That's true.
And I wonder if food has been that in some ways for us.
Well, one thing I will relate to with my father is that my father was a child of the Depression. And I mean, he was born as the New Deal was starting. I mean, the very year that the New Deal was starting is when he was born. And so it was common for him not to have food to eat, or not knowing where their next meal was going to come from. And being raised by a single father, he, it was not a guarantee that he was going to eat that day.
Now, the thing that I often consider in these kinds of conversations, especially if you talk about being more enlightened and, when you know better, you do better, is there a bit of elitism on the part of Van Jones and even us in this conversation?
How do we get in here?
Because we have to talk about reading Van Jones out of our own experience, because we're kind of saying, like, there is a diet, we're assuming there's something problematic about the Black soul food diet.
Well, also, I'll give my own testimony. I never thought about eating more healthy, and I love my fried chicken and the way my grandmother made it, and that was basically salt in a pot. But and I loved it. I mean,
oh yeah, put that chicken in there too.
I mean,
I've got a gallon of salt.
I'm not going to give away Big Mama's cooking secrets, but it was a lot of salt.
I think you just did. I think.
No, I didn't. But the only thing that changed a lot of my behavior was the 2 strokes that I had in 2011, and I had said that I would never change my eating habits, and if I just have to die, I'll die.
But was that only your diet, would you say?
It was also stress, and that's something that the Black community believe in is, is stress, family stress. We just believe in it. We believe that's a part of being in a Black family is, you got to fight with your family a lot. You will say something not even personal. You'll say something that's not true, but hey, we all forgive each other eventually. And then we don't know that behavior along with our diets. And then we go to work and deal with being Black. And then we drive in the streets and we're dealing with the police departments that are, deciding whether they want to pick one of us off that day. So we're dealing with all these stresses everywhere we go. And then we come home and eat a plate full of stress.
Right. And I think the plate is the last thing. We have assumed, because we've been told again and again that we eat too much salt, that our diet is wrong, that we have a history of a wrong diet. But there's a lot of stress exposures that I think go uninterrogated in the whole analysis that I think are way more significant.
So there's a case to be made for what Van Jones said. And then he also had like what the governmental component is in improving the health disparities. But there's also what we have to do.
Yeah. And then I think this trended so much because of, in the Black community, it trended not so much because of the CNN article, but the News One article, and the way the Black media chose to represent. One says slanted, one says represent this op-ed piece, because that one was accusatory of Van Jones and uses the book for today. You like how I did that segue? How to Be an Anti-Racist. Uses the author's own words, quotes, to in essence, what Van Jones is saying.
Well, that's interesting because I think they're making a tremendous leap through everything we said about the critiques that we had towards Van Jones.
Yeah, well, I think in talking about is something anti-Black, the definition here is mostly referring to statements that assume certain things about Black practices. And even if someone is well-meaning, they could still be well-meaning anti-Black kind of remarks. That's the definition.
I think when it's coming from the Black community and it's well-meaning, I'm not talking about you're being Candace Owens. I'm talking about you're actually being well-meaning. I don't think there's such thing as anti-Black. It could be you're just wrong, but I never take it as you being anti-Black.
Let me read a quote and you tell me if this changes or supports what you're saying. It appears that every time there's a health crisis or a crisis in the Black community, there's always a Van Jones, and remember, we was doing this for a long time with Bill Cosby, where someone steps forward.
Who I actually agreed with. So.
Yeah, someone steps forward and says, personal responsibility. There's always that person in the midst of a crisis. And we have to greet with the eye of suspicion why there's a pattern, why the media grabs on to, oh yeah, Black people, y'all do need to do something.
Wait a minute. There is a major difference between what Van Jones did here and what Bill Cosby did back then.
Okay.
Van Jones wrote for a white-owned, white media company. Bill Cosby was speaking at the Rainbow Push Convention, and it was supposed to be a closed session that only the people who were there for the convention heard. Somebody recorded him and released the video.
That is a very important point to make, because even the, you remember when Bill Cosby was going around different places and having the call outs?
Yes.
With, I forget if it was just Black men. I think some of them was just Black men. Yeah. But those were always internal conversations. Yes. They were always for Black communities. Yeah. So the quote that he has, the rise of mass incarceration was partially fueled by Black people who, even as they adopted racist ideas, did so ostensibly out of trying to save the Black community in the 1970s.
Okay. When the crime bill came up, and this is very real for me. I was living in the Buffalo inner city at the time. And at the time, there was a house across the street from me that was a crack house. And the activity that was going on there was, not only was it daily, it was all day. Until it finally exploded. I remember there was a mayor election, and this situation exploded to where they had a shootout. You see your parents crawling on the floor because there's these shootouts happening, and we're all scared about bullets flying into our houses. You see all those things going on. You're not thinking about, are these new laws going to negatively impact us and all those type of things. I mean, remember back then in the early 90s, it was like every corner was like a crack corner. You know, that is going on, and it's easy to champion a bill that hits us as hard as this one, as the crime bill did.
Say that the crime bill was racist policy?
It was extremely racist.
Would you have still supported it if you knew what was going to come out of it?
I really don't know.
Okay. That is what he's referring to when he talks about things being anti-Black. That even though it was well-intended, Black people supported it, not saying, yay, racist policy. They didn't know that was going to happen. But it was predicated on certain racist assumptions. I don't want to get too off topic before we close this one off, because I asked a question. I asked a question, if you remember, is there a bit of elitism here on the personal responsibility front that is most offensive to the Black reader?
There's an elitism, but I don't think it's a purposeful elitism. Somewhere along the
Here we go with like, well, if as long as they didn't mean to.
No. You're living your life every day.
Yeah.
And you and I, we stay related and grounded to our community.
Right.
But where we go to work is 90% white. Although we teach in Africana studies. And somewhere in there, we're not relating to the everyday grind and struggle, you know, and so there could be an elitism there, but I don't think it's purposeful. I don't think that is mean-spirited.
I do think those well-intentioned assumptions about Black people in a way that we essentialize Blackness around certain experiences and overlook the ways that there is some finger wagging involved when we say, got it right. Come on, Black people. I mean, I think there is something that needs to be interrogated about that, because it is those well-meaning and undercover ways of critiquing Black people that continue to uphold white supremacy and racist ideals.
See, I don't think of it as upholding white supremacy. I think like E.B. Du Bois was saying, like with the talented 10th, aren't we supposed, which a lot of people find the talented 10th, elitist, but if you have gone to another station in life, you know, isn't that part of the each one teach one? Isn't that reaching back? And I mean,
I think we continue to examine the stations.
Okay, but
because we have to examine the capitalist structures that built those stations.
I understand that too, but don't we? Once you become educated, don't you help teach? I mean, like, does everybody who teach have to be in the ivory tower? Do they have to be in the walls of your classroom?
We do have a commitment to engage people at every level, knowing that we're always connected to them, that they suffer from crisis and scarcity, but we also suffer from crisis and scarcity in other ways at whatever station in life we are as well, by virtue of being Black folk.
Okay, I'll let that be the last word.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So once again, go and subscribe to Ntare and Gault, our YouTube channel, and you'll get more notifications about, and you'll see enlightening conversations like this. And you'll see other like some videos and things like that. So thank you very much, and tune in next week.
Thanks.